G'day guys, welcome back to Living with BC. I'm Ben. Today we're going to have a bit of a talk about Netflix's new TV series, Shadow and Bone. It's been out for about a week now, so I hope you've all seen it because there's spoilers coming up. Alright, first off, I was pretty apprehensive about this one. A little while ago I watched Netflix's Cursed, and I was really let down. I thought they could have done a phenomenal job with that. It could have been so much better than what it was. I don't know whether there was budgeting or time constraints or some sort of issue, but it was nowhere near as good as it should have been. Coupled with that, I read Six of Crows. So I haven't read Shadow and Bone or that series at all, but I've read a little bit of Six of Crows, about a third or maybe even only a quarter, a couple of years ago. And look, it just didn't tickle my fancy. I couldn't get past the fact that there were 16-year-old kids kind of running the show. So those two things combined, I wasn't really sure what to expect with this, but I'm happy to say I really enjoyed it. I thought the acting was great. I thought every casting decision was awesome. Ben Barnes, he's awesome in everything he does, but played his role perfectly. Likewise, so did everyone else. It's sometimes a bit difficult when you get unknowns. Now, I don't know if they're completely unknown or if they worked in stage before or something like that, but they weren't really familiar people that, we could point to and go, I've seen that person and that person. Not for myself anyway. But I thought everyone was awesome. Look, Alina was Alina. She was kind of young, naive, a little bit sort of shy, misled at times. But then on the other hand, really strong and courageous when she needed to be as well. The Crows, I think, made this show. I know they're not supposed to be in it because Shadow and Bone is just supposed to be more Alina's story, and the Crows come into it with Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. But I thought they really made it. I was really, really impressed. Inej, I thought was awesome. I'm totally convinced that she could kill me in my sleep, and in my dying breath, I would thank her for doing it so beautifully. Like, she was awesome in that role. Jesper as well brought this really funny, cocky vibe to things. He's just how he's going up against the magicians. He's like, oh, I do love a challenge. I thought he was awesome. Really, really good. He's like a little bit vain, a little bit full of himself, always checking himself out in the mirror, practicing his gun twirling and things like that. But he was brilliant. And Kaz or Kez? I think it's Kaz. He was one that I was really, really unsure about when I knew that the character was in this TV show, because he was probably my biggest hurdle getting into Six of Crows, and one of the reasons I didn't continue was I just couldn't believe that this 16, 17-year-old kid was running a gambling hall and doing all these underworld criminal activities, and keeping up with, sort of mid-20s into their 30s, into their 40s year old sort of career criminals. And you've got this 16, 17-year-old kid who's just as good with this cold, calculating mind. In the book, on page, it didn't really come across. But with this guy right here, I'm sold. Absolutely. Played beautifully. It was honestly amazing. Really, really good. I can absolutely see him as kind of running, what they call it, the barrel, I think. He runs his little underworld kingdom. 100% awesome. An awesome job including them in this one as well. The only bit in terms of characters that I had an issue was Nina and what's his name? Matthias, I think his name was. I didn't have an issue with the acting. I think they were fine in terms of acting. I guess just their story seemed really flat compared to the others. And I guess it was just sort of seemed like it was tacked on. Wasn't really wound into the script as well. It's like after they'd finished writing and maybe even finished filming, they're like, oh shit, what about these characters? Oh, let's quickly think of a storyline for them. It wasn't very strong for me. So that was like a bit of an issue. The plot itself was pretty typical. Light versus dark. We find out Alina has some special light powers, power of goodness, whatever. So she's whisked off to a castle and has to train there, which she doesn't really do much training. Like, I really like training montages, and nothing really happens. She gets hit with a stick a couple times, and then suddenly she can use her powers, and that's kind of it. Yeah, the romance between her and General Kerrigan was like, for me, for some, I'm like a 32-year-old male. I'm like, eh. But I mean, the target audience for these sorts of things, they are sort of 15, 16-year-old kids. Like, they'd probably be into that, or buy into it a little bit more than I did. So yeah, I could sort of take it or leave it. But look, when you're copying from a book or a set of books, I mean, you can't stray too far from the source material. The magic in this book was pretty good. I did have an issue. It's not super well explained. So when you come into it from where I did, having not read the books, it's not ridiculously hard to figure out. I mean, they call them Inferni, and they can play with fire, and they don't really actually, heart renders do something with your heart. I think they can shut your heart off or whatever, or strengthen it, as Nina does with Matthias. But for the other things, it's not really spoken about too much. It's just like a couple lines here and there, but you don't really get a full in-depth kind of exposition about how the magic system works. It's just kind of there. One thing I didn't like about it, and this isn't, I don't think any issue, like obviously this would have come from the source material, but the second we meet General Kerrigan, like, I mean, obviously, like, have a look at him. I know he can't help his hair color, but I mean, he's got black hair and a black beard. He's dressed in all black. He rides a black horse with a black saddle, and his magic power is summoning black shadows that kill people. Like, I don't know what he does, but and black shadows come up, and he turns it into like Krillin's disc thing and chops someone's head off. Like, the second we meet him and he does that to, cut Alina's arm and find out that she's the summoner and the chosen one and whatever, like, everyone else is just like, yeah, this is totally normal, but he's a good guy. So no, the guy that wears all black and can summon black shadows out of nothing is clearly the bad guy. Like, how does no one see this? This is ridiculous. Everyone's just like, no, 100%, he's the good guy. And the other thing, actually, I kind of thought was funny, when his mum, like Bagda, takes Alina off, and she's like, you got to get out of here because he's a bad guy and he's going to kill you or whatever. And Alina's like, no, he's a good guy. Like, the bad guy was his great granddad or something. And to kind of prove her point, she, like, Bagda, like, throws back a cover on a portrait of him. And it's like, see, there's a portrait of him that proves he's a bad guy. And Alina's like, oh my God, like, mind blown. How did I not see it before? Of course, he's a bad guy because he has a painting of himself hidden in a cellar somewhere. Like, I don't know. If that was a big reveal moment for anyone else, like, the first second we meet the guy, he summons darkness. He's clearly the bad guy. The sets in this were awesome. The costumes were awesome again. Yeah, there's not a lot I can really criticize. I mean, obviously, if you're not into magic and that kind of thing, you're probably not going to like it. So don't, watch it and blame me. But for someone who's into that kind of stuff, you're into, fantasy, even if it's kind of young adult fantasy, I'd give it a go. I liked it. It was enjoyable enough. Obviously, it's typical, a girl who's young and naive, and she's selected as the chosen one, and at first she doesn't believe she can do it, but then she believes in herself and saves the day. It's a pretty typical trope. It's light versus dark, good versus evil. I mean, the reason these things keep repeating themselves is because people like them. So I don't hate on it for anything like that. Like I said, the acting was brilliant. The only thing that I could really say in terms of, like, proper storyline, there's like a bit at the end where Nina and Matthias, I mean, their whole love story was a bit weird. I mean, I know they're supposed to be like 16-year-old kids, and 16-year-old kids would lap it up. Of course, you tickle someone and then you fall in love with them. That's how love works. But in terms of, like, they then go through that period where they're enemies because she's a magician, or Grisha, and he's a Grisha hunter, and then they fall in love, and you know, because she tickles him a lot, and that's how you fall in love. And then the other Grisha are going to capture him and kill him, and she doesn't want to do that because she's obviously in love with him. So she like sells him to slavers, with the hope that she can somehow free him later, right? We don't know, because last scene we see is he's in a cell on a ship, and then he's like choking her because he thinks that this is like her plan all along, and it's like, come on. Like, honestly, like, if you want to market the show to kids, like, that's okay. You could throw something like that in there. But I don't think there's many kids, even any 15, 16-year-old who would look at that. They'd be like, this is ridiculous. You could solve this problem with a 5-minute conversation. You know, she would just explain that the Grisha were going to take you away and kill you, and to save your life, she had to sell you to slavers. Kind of sucks, but you're going to, or like whatever it was, I can't remember. It's like maybe she said that he was a slaver. Something like that. Anyway, she's like, option A, you die. Option B, you're in jail and I can maybe free you. And he chokes her because he thinks that was her plan all along. That was a bit crappy, to be honest with you. And the rest of the show was really good. There's a lot of like really funny bits in it that are just like, I don't know. Yeah, I just keep coming back to the crows. They actually really surprised me. And they really hold their own too. There's a bit where Inej is fighting one of the Grisha, and she's obviously kind of losing like a little bit, but she does hold her own well enough. And that's another good thing too. The magicians, the Grisha, aren't invulnerable. Like, often you see things like this where you'll see the bad guy magician and he can, you know, he's fighting 20 big burly soldiers all at once and just throwing them around the room. And then when it comes time for like the 5 heroes to do their thing, he can't fight the 5 young kids. It's like, that's ridiculous. Whereas in this, I mean, the Grisha can die just as easily as anyone else. I mean, yeah, they got like their powers that they can use and gives them a slight advantage, but you know, they die just as easily as the next person. That's really cool. Well, I shouldn't say it's cool, like, but it's a good thing. It's like, you know, you can't have an army of magicians who are all invincible and then also say that you're the underdogs. That's ridiculous. Anyway, guys, I think that's it. Yeah, let me know how you go. If you've seen it, throw a comment in the comment section. If you haven't, check it out. Obviously, I've just spoiled a bunch of it for you, but hopefully it's still good. If you like this video, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe. As always, stay cool.